Well, hi, Sam. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Um, I am really pleased that you're my number one for my new podcast. So pumped.
Woohoo.
And we've just been having a little catch up, but I'd love it if you could just go over a little of your background and expand for me.
Yeah, sure. So I had some health struggles pretty early on in my teen years. I was a really healthy kid, very active, had a lot of hobbies, all of that sort of thing. It was more when I sort of hit those hormonal teenage years that things started to fall apart a little bit. So I had glandular fever when I was 15 years old, and it didn't actually get diagnosed until I'd already had it for about 3 months, because we got the first time that we suspected it, we got the blood test too early, so it came back negative. And so they ruled it out completely. And it wasn't until 3 months later I ended up in hospital with a secondary infection of tonsillitis, couldn't even swallow saliva. And they turned around and took my bloods, and they're like, "Oh yeah, you've got glandular, and your load's really high, and all of this sort of thing." So that was sort of the kicking off point for my health spiral, for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
It was about a year later, when I was about 16 and a half, I got diagnosed with Hashimoto's. And that was actually before thyroid was really well known in sort of the general health circles. It was definitely something that nutritionists and naturopaths were aware of, but it was pretty unknown in the general health world. And they basically turned around to me and said, listen, your thyroid normals are normal other than your antibodies. So we're just going to let your thyroid destroy itself, and then we'll start medicating you when you're out of normal range. And this sort of kept going on. I got accused by one doctor of being a bit of a hypochondriac. I had some people, suggest that I had an eating disorder, all of this sort of thing, because I just was not getting better. My weight was fluctuating all over the place. And it was actually when I was 19, I thought I had the flu, and I went to an after hours doctor, and she took one look at me and she said, "Have you ever been diagnosed with any thyroid condition?" And I said, "Yep, I've been told that I have autoimmune thyroid." And she turned around and said, "I want you to go and get a scan on your thyroid this week."
Wow.
And it turned out that I had thyroid cancer for almost that entire journey, because I actually had the slowest growing form, and yet it had still taken over one of the entire lobes of my thyroid. It was in the other one as well. And I also had 18 of 20 lymph nodes that were positive for cancer as well.
And what age were you at that stage?
That was when I was 19 years old. So I was still an absolute baby. But it's actually really common age for thyroid cancer to be diagnosed in, particularly in women. And I guess the way that I ended up actually going into the natural therapies world is that I had no post-treatment support. So I had total thyroidectomy and all of the lymph nodes on the left side taken out as well. And then 3 months later, I had radioactive iodine treatment. And it's actually, at the time, it was one of the highest doses that they had ever given of radioactive iodine, just because it was so advanced. It was nearly about to hit my bloodstream by the time we found it. Um, and then they basically said, "Okay, there you go. We'll isolate you for 5 days, and then off you go, off you trot." And I was like, "Oh, okay, is that it?" But the problem is that after all of that happening, between the stress, the treatment, the surgery, all of that, my immune system was shot. I got 3 infections back to back in 3 weeks at one point, because my immune system was just non-existent at that point. It had nothing left in terms of nutrients, anything like that, to actually do anything.
And
So
and is that something you worked out yourself? Did someone sort of say that to you, or you're just like, oh, I'm just recurrent infection, something's not right?
well, I knew something wasn't right, and I've always been quite in tune with my body and knowing when something isn't quite right. And that was absolutely what happened with the cancer as well. That's why the doctors kept on telling me I was a hypochondriac, because I kept on coming back and being like, something's not fitting, something's not right. I don't know what it is, but I need to find it. Um, but no, it was just that I knew that I wasn't getting better, and that I should have been, because I no longer, like, I'd had my 1 year scan by that point that came back that I was officially cancer free. And yet I was still having all these symptoms. I was still run down. I was still had no energy, no motivation. And as you know quite well, our family is very much into, research and learning and all of that sort of thing. So I started to do a little bit of research. And the way that I actually corrected the problem is that I ate a tablespoon of garlic every single day for 3 months. I was obviously single at this point. But I had it at least, most of it was at least lightly cooked, like just a little bit of saute at the end of, cooking some spinach or something. And after that, I stopped getting sick. And that really intrigued me. And I wanted to learn more about why that happened and why it was so effective for me. And one day I had a weekend day off, which almost never happened back then when I was working in retail. I saw an open day for Endeavour College, and the rest is history.
Wow. And so, we've as we were talking earlier, that my background is in nursing, and your mum is also a nurse. And so, did doing more mainstream ever cross your mind, or you were always, because of um, the lack of feeding into you with regards to improving your immune system, did that always send you down the path of natural therapies?
Honestly, I originally swore, black and blue, and you can even ask my mum about this, I would never go into medicine. I hated it with a passion because of how it affected, our lives and our families between, the work hours, the unpredictability, because she worked a lot of night shifts, especially when I was younger. I would have to go to a family member's place and walk to school. So that's where I pretty much got trained into being an early bird, because I get kicked out of bed at 6 o'clock in the morning. But also in terms of like energy, her emotions, all of that sort of thing. So I was never really a big fan of it. And honestly, at the time, I didn't really think of nutrition as being an equivalent to medicine until I was actually starting to study it and starting to learn about the impact it had. That being said, I do absolutely think that, conventional medicine saved my life. That is not a doubt. I've never been anti conventional medicine. It definitely has its place. But when it came to my health journey, there has been multiple points where conventional medicine has fallen short of what I actually needed in order to heal myself and in order to live my life.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Fascinating. So, how did you navigate mentally through your diagnosis at such a young age?
Honestly, especially with the diagnosis of cancer, it was more of a relief initially than anything,
Right.
because I had been so convinced for so long that something was wrong. And, I was sitting there going, am I just like, are my instincts off? Is it all in my head? Is this all psychological? So getting that diagnosis was a massive relief. Um, and also, 6 months into my degree, I also received an extra diagnosis, a bonus one, if you will, of Ehlers-Danlos, which is a connective tissue disease. So with that one, again, there were so many little things that weren't adding up, and discovering that diagnosis not only made myself, but my entire family, as it's a genetic disease, we all looked at that and went, oh, you mean normal people don't have all of those symptoms? Because when your whole family has them, you think it's normal. But eventually, with both of those diagnoses, I did start to feel a bit restricted by them. Like I felt like my life had been limited. I initially had a lot of interest in looking at joining one of the armed forces when I was sort of in my late teens. But because I'd had a total thyroidectomy, I was not able to do that even as a civilian side of things, simply because I rely 100% on medication to live. And so if I got deployed, I would not be able to take my medication. Like you can't guarantee that you're going to have access to refrigerated medication when you're in the field. So I felt like I missed out on that. When I had my EDS diagnosis, I didn't feel like I could do things like, I got told yoga was going to be bad for me because I'm so hypermobile. I'm a real adrenaline junkie. So things like skydiving, I got told that I shouldn't be doing that. But eventually I reached this point of realizing that basically I can live my life how I want to and deal with things like early onset osteoarthritis, or I can not live my life the way I want to. I can feel restricted, I can feel trapped, And there's still a decent chance that I'm going to end up with osteoarthritis, still a decent chance I'm going to have flare-ups, all of that sort of thing. So I just got to the point where I'm like, you know what? If the trade-off is worth it for me, then I'm going to do it. And I did eventually go skydiving, and I didn't have too many serious side effects from it.
And how was that? Oh, that's on my bucket list, I have to say.
It is amazing. I would absolutely do it again. The only real thing that I walked away permanently with that is that it actually did a little bit of damage to my hearing in one of my ears.
Oh,
Like only like the slightest little bit of hearing loss, but we think like that the pressure change like dislodged one of the bones in my ear, because again, connective tissue is in the ear as well as everywhere else. So
yeah, right.
yeah, no, but it is the best feeling. I did the jump over the Yarra Valley, and just being able to see that, being able to get that rush, and then being sitting there for a good 5 minutes looking at how amazing your local area is just unbelievable.
Oh, that's fantastic. What a great story. Oh, so thanks for sharing all that. I wanted to just sort of change direction a little bit now and focus a little bit more on work. And so you're a qualified nutritionist.
Yes.
You've come out. You're seeing people. What changed to take you from the traditional concept of working as a nutritionist, seeing people, to the more business mentoring model that you currently work with?
Sure. So, put very simply, failure. Failure is what did it for me. So, I'm a very ambitious person, and that's how I've always been. So when I walked out of Endeavour with my qualification, I had not one but two sets of rooms. I, started to really try and get the clinical side of my practice going. And in 3 months, I completely burnt myself out and lost over $10,000
Wow. Okay.
because I just went about it all the wrong way. And it was all of the things that I now teach people that I had to learn the hard way. And it actually got to the point where I figured out that I was earning more money at my part-time job at Pet Barn than I was actually seeing people as a qualified nutritionist when I did the maths on it. So as a way to sort of promote myself, I've always loved writing. So I started to write blogs. Some of them were my own blogs on my website. Some were blogs on other people's site to sort of get some cross promotion. Eventually, I found out that I could get paid to do that for other people. So it became a little bit of a side hustle, just something to keep me going until my clinical practice got up and running and I could focus on that. And then eventually I figured out that I much preferred it and that worked better for me. So it became my full-time job. Now, when I say full-time, I don't mean full-time hours. It's more full-time pay, because I very much design my business around my health, and my health sort of taps out at about 30 hours a week. Anything more than that, I start to get a lot more flare-ups, symptoms, pain, all of that sort of thing.
Okay.
And then from there, from being a full-time writer, I realized that when I was doing my VIP calls with people, I was already doing a lot of mentoring and coaching with people in terms of how they marketed themselves, and not just in the form of written words. So eventually I fought it for a long time, but I really became interested in training other people, teaching other people how to market themselves and how to find a way that works for them. And again, it's just sort of further developed into, a lot of it is focused on marketing, but there is a general business mentoring side to it now as well.
Mm. So, what would you say then to a practitioner who's feeling stuck and feeling as though their current model of practice is not what they wanted, but just sort of happened? They might be bleeding money, um, seeing patients or clients that are not who they really, who fills them with energy. What would you say?
Sure. So I think that it's really important to start off with identifying within that business that you're in what's feeling right and what's feeling wrong, because most of the time there's some things that do feel good, there's parts that do light you up, but there's obviously at least one part in the business that is draining you of all of your energy and all of your passion. So I'd be asking, is it how you're working with people? Do you find working one-on-one is really draining and you actually really prefer group work, which is very much how I feel. I love working with groups and I love working with like events and stuff. So I try and incorporate that into my business wherever I can. Is it the length of time that you're spending with people? You know, would you prefer to be spending a 5-day retreat helping them completely reboot it? Or would you prefer, you know, much more acute consults? How many hours you spent slaving over treatment plans? You know, is there a way that you can streamline that and make it easier for yourself? Is it that you have clients who aren't following your advice? If so, is that because they're not the right people for you? They're not committed to making that change? Or is it because you're giving so much advice that you're overwhelming people and that's something you can simplify? So once you know what is wrong, you can find solutions. The amazing thing about being a practitioner these days is that you can design it into anything you want. So if you don't like a particular part of being a practitioner, you can turn around and say, that is not part of what my business is. And you can build a business around the stuff that you do enjoy.
Do you think there's a fear with that for people saying no to clients that otherwise might bring them money?
Absolutely. And this is something that you know, and anyone listening who knows me, I talk a lot about niching and choosing an ideal client. And there is so much fear around this because so many practitioners are afraid that they're going to lose business, they're going to lose income because of it. But there is a big difference between who actually physically walks into your clinic room and has like a session with you versus who you spend your time marketing to. That is absolutely up to you. If you want to see every single person who books in with you, you can. But that doesn't mean that you need to be trying to market to every single person in the world. The more specific you get, particularly when it comes to your marketing and the majority of people that you're working with, the more authority that you build as a practitioner, and the more likely that it is that your word of mouth reputation will spread. Because a lot of people will say, oh, you know, I saw this great nutritionist or I saw that great naturopath, and that might not do anything. But if they turn around and say, oh, I saw this amazing naturopath and, you know, she's really great at working with thyroid health, every single person who has a thyroid condition is all of a sudden going to start listening to what you have to say. It also makes your work as a practitioner a lot easier because, especially with new practitioners, I hear about them getting burnt out because they're researching 20 different health conditions every single week because they're seeing 20 different types of people and completely burning themselves out. If you're only working with one really specific group of things, especially the first appointment, you're usually going to be giving very similar advice around nutrition, exercise, stress, sleep, and environment across the board. So you're spending less time, and that means you have more energy to help more people as well.
Oh, just such great advice. Thanks, Sam. So this podcast is called Health Bricks, as it aims to focus on foundational concepts that promote health and personal empowerment, etc. I'd like to ask you to give 4 health bricks if you can, but splitting them up, looking at what are 2 foundational areas in your life that are non-negotiable to promoting your own personal well-being that you would kind of consider health bricks for you, and then looking at 2 business health bricks that things you would say to build into your business that promote the well-being of your business as well.
Sure. So obviously these do overlap a little bit because I'm sure all business owners know that, you know, our business kind of turns into our life a bit, or at least it's a good percentage of it. In terms of personal well-being, the top 2 I would pick is number 1 is working with my spoons. So for those who aren't aware of the spoon theory, it's basically an explanation as to how people with chronic conditions such as myself have limited energy, limited ability to do things in a given day. And it's a good way of representing how much energy you may or may not have. So working with what I consider my spoons on a daily basis and sort of choosing what I do each day based on that. So for example, today is actually quite a good day, even though I'm having a bit of a pain flare up at the moment. I got a decent night's sleep, so I'm feeling pretty energized. I've taken all my sups, so I can probably do a fair bit today. But maybe in a couple of days' time, my energy might drop and I need to adjust my schedule accordingly. So, really focusing in on using my energy and my motivation to do the little things that are going to get me by without trying to, I guess, overexpend myself. A lot of this also ties in with working with my cycle as well. So I'm a big believer in sort of building my day around what point in my cycle I am, using, you know, my high energy of my follicular phase to get a lot of stuff done, and then being a little bit gentler with myself when I hit my luteal phase. I'm pretty lucky that my cycle is pretty decent compared to a lot of women. I only get some very mild PMS symptoms and a bit of an energy drop, but I also know that I'm a lot more likely to have pain flare-ups in my luteal phase. So again, I sort of design my days based on what I know is likely to happen based on that. So that would be number one. And honestly, number two is always going back to the basics when things start to go a little bit awry. So this is a little story that I have that is 100% true, and it just shows how your brain gets a little bit crazy sometimes. But a little while ago, I remember going for a walk with my partner and my dog, and I'd been convinced that something was really seriously wrong at one point. Like, I was sitting there going, I'm having all of these symptoms, you know, yes, it could be my EDS, but I was getting that instinct that something more was going on. And I was sitting there going, oh my God, do I have cancer again? Am I iron deficient? Am I copper toxic? What's happening? I'm going to need to get all these blood tests. And then it turns out that I had not drunk water that day. And so it's really about going back to that, you know, eating your veggies, drinking your water, moving your body regularly, getting decent sleep, having a good way to unwind. So really going back to those basics whenever I get overwhelmed, overworked, anything like that. And I've done a lot of education with my partner around how to deal with me when I get in that state, because I do get a little overwrought and a little anxious. So we really do practice every time we start to feel unwell or anything like that, going back to those real basic foundation things that everyone already knows. And yet they're the first things that go out the window when life gets a little bit hectic. Then when it comes to business well-being, my number one would be boundaries, boundaries, boundaries. I learned this again the hard way in terms of, you know, not charging well for my time, answering emails at all times of day and night, letting people, you know, spend hours on a call with me for free, all of that sort of thing. And that is a big sapper of time, of energy, and eventually of money as well. So now I have more and more boundaries going in place every single week. I'm actually in the process of handing over pretty much all of my new email inquiries over to a VA so she can answer them. She can deal with any of the ones that might be better off being referred to someone else. She can screen to see whether they're a good fit for me, all of that sort of thing. So having those boundaries in place mean that I can give the best of myself to the clients who do show up and the clients who do come back again and again, because I have a really loyal client base. I've got VIPs who have been with me almost from the beginning, and I want to make sure that I've got the energy to serve them and to promote what they do, because I'm so passionate about what they do, and that needs to come through in their marketing. And number two, and I've touched on this several times already, so it had to be one, is design your business to suit your life, not vice versa.
Right.
The amount of people who end up in a business that they don't like simply because they think that's what they have to do, and they end up burnt out and they end up miserable. I end up turning around to them and being like, but what if you did it this way? Would that be better for your energy? Would that be better for your time? You know, you've got a lot of practitioners who have families, who have loved ones who need care, because a lot of us have gone into this either to take care of our own health or to take care of the health of a loved one, and to sort of get to the root cause of all of that going on. So you do get to design your business to suit your life. Absolutely. I have it so that I'm very flexible, so that if I do have a low spoon day, it's not going to be the end of the world. I can delay work for a day or two. I also have designed it so that I can work from cafes because I love food. I love coffee, although I'm being a good girl and having chai at the moment because I'm a little bit under the weather. And that is something that I've built into my business so that I can do that. And I will often, when I'm meeting people who are Melbourne based, I'll turn around and say, we could have a Zoom call, but how about we go to your favorite local cafe? And it means that my business gets to pay for my coffee addiction as well. So really designing that business to suit your life, to suit who you want to be, what you want your life to be like, who you want to be helping, because there is no rule book for business. You get to choose every single aspect of your business as long as it's legal and as long as it's within, sort of the terms of whichever association or regulatory body you are part of. It is 100% on your terms, and you get to decide what is and what isn't in your business.
I think that's so liberating as well for people to hear, who might be feeling like they've got a noose around their neck, if they're stuck in something that is, just not where they want to be.
And listen, it's something I often have to remind myself as well when I get caught up in that little bit of hustle culture and I'm pushing and I'm, hustling to get more clients, more people in my courses, all of that sort of thing. I catch myself as often as I can, and I just kind of go, is this what you want your life to be like? Do you want to be chasing this, or do you want to be designing it? And that's where I pull myself back into place.
Yeah. Oh, so good, Sam. Thanks. They are classic gold nuggets of wisdom that you've shared today. I'm so appreciative. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for being the first on Health Bricks.
I'm excited to see who you've got lined up from here on out too.
And I'm sure we'll have you again in the future, but thanks so much.
Thank you.
See you now.